Say what you will about Rick and Morty, but the show has some banger episodes. Each season has at least one episode that is just absolutely incredible, and most seasons have multiple, where calling it amazing would be an understatement. But out of the current 71 episodes of Rick and Morty that we have in our possession, what are the 5 best? Which 5 best show what Rick and Morty is truly capable of? Let's get into it. So here are the 5 episodes of Rick and Morty that I personally think are the best. This is just my opinion, and these aren't my favorite episodes per se, but this is the collection of the 5 episodes that are the peak of the show in my opinion. Starting off with number 5, we have Fear No Mort, Season 7, Episode 10. In a series renowned for its inventive storytelling, sharp humor, and emotional depth, Rick and Morty Season 7, Episode 10, Fear No Mort, manages to stand out as a quintessential episode. While the show has delivered countless memorable installments over the years, this episode claims its place as the 5th greatest in the series. Through its originality, character development, thrilling narrative, and emotional resonance, Fear No Mort exemplifies the creative heights the show can reach. The episode begins with a premise that is both simple and unusual. Rick and Morty deliberately set out to experience fear.
We've seen too much.
This deceptively straightforward setup lulls the audience into underestimating the mysterious plot hole. Funny, right? Yeah, okay, anyways. The story masterfully subverts expectations, pulling the rug out from under Rick, Morty, and the viewers as the true significance of the hole is revealed. It is not merely a physical space, but a profound and destabilizing force that challenges the characters on an emotional and psychological level. This twist sets the stage for an exploration of deeper themes, while maintaining the show's signature absurdity. I mean, like, technically the hole is just a plot device to bring out greater growth for the characters, but I mean, who cares? Who's keeping track of something like that? Something that makes this episode so unique is how it treats Diane.
That's my wife from the day I lost her.
Up until now, Diane has been a character that has rarely surpassed a few moments of screen time. However, in this episode, she is a main character. Although she isn't real, we're still able to form some sense of who she was as a person. She has largely been a mystery up until now, but this episode makes us feel like we've known her for forever.
That's how I met my wife.
This just continues the trend that this episode does things we have never seen before in any episode of Rick and Morty. At its core, Fear No More is a paradigm of originality. This episode feels unlike anything Rick and Morty has ever done, offering a fresh and thrilling take on the suspense genre. Additionally, it serves as a pivotal moment in the evolving relationship between Rick and Morty. It's very easy for the dynamic between Rick and Morty to get stale, so episodes like this change it up, but it isn't just a one-time thing. Every now and then there's an episode that causes ridiculous growth for the two characters, and then this growth just continues into the coming episodes, which means the Rick and Morty we see in Season 8 will be a little bit different because of the events of this episode. Fear No More injects new energy into the show.
So, 27?
Dad, you're traumatizing her.
What?
By breaking down the relationship between Rick and Morty and facilitating significant growth for both characters. Rick seems to grow throughout the episode, but we later learn that was just a facade, courtesy of the hole. But the brief moments of this episode that do have the real Rick, if that word even means anything in the show at this point, do show how much Rick has changed over the past 7 seasons. The narrative keeps viewers on the edge of their seats, which, in my opinion, is the best place to be when watching something. The plot is layered with twists that consistently wreck your expectations, embracing a meta-commentary that maximizes the suspense and humor. Each revelation in this episode leads to another upending. This meta-on-meta storytelling is a hallmark of the series, but in this episode it is executed with exceptional finesse, making this one of the most impressive episodes when it comes to shock value and clever storytelling. Humor, of course, remains a cornerstone of Rick and Morty, and Fear No Mort is no exception despite its serious tone. This episode's jokes land so well, blending the amazing absurdity of Rick and Morty with wit that we just love to watch. This episode's jokes land so well, and it's just so rewatchable. A, because it's just incredibly well written, and then B, it's hilarious. The emotional depth of this episode culminates in one of the sweetest endings in the show's history. Rick keeping a picture of Morty in his wallet and then immortalizing Morty's bravery inside of a Denny's bathroom is touching and a little funny, encapsulating the unique blend of sentimentality and irreverence that defines this series. This moment not only solidifies the bond between the two characters, but also leaves a lasting impression on the audience. Fear No Mort is a jaw-dropping episode that showcases everything that makes Rick and Morty great. The legacy this episode has already left behind speaks for its quality, and it is literally the newest thing the show has put out, because the anime doesn't count. So, number 5, the 5th greatest episode of all time in Rick and Morty, is Fear No Mort. Number 4, the Vat of Acid episode. No conversation about the greatest episodes in Rick and Morty would be complete if the Vat of Acid episode was left out. This episode is just different. Like the Fear Hole episode, it stands out from other Rick and Morty episodes. The obvious similarity between the two being that it's largely a standalone adventure from Morty that leads to significant character development for him, but both episodes follow a very similar plot structure in the fact that they completely differ from any other episode that Rick and Morty has put out up until now. In this episode, Morty and Rick have a bit of a falling out over a certain container of liquid that may may or may not be acid. This disagreement angers the both of them so much that Rick decides to teach Morty the ultimate lesson to never disrespect him. Morty is given a place-saving device where he's under the assumption that he can do anything, yet this ability severely traumatizes him, leads to a relationship that he will never be able to salvage, and the death of one SWAT trooper who had some concerning mental things going on. The episode begins with a cold open that efficiently sets the stage for the story while showcasing the current state of Rick and Morty's relationship. The absurd premise of a literal vat of acid as an escape plan is just classic Rick and Morty humor. This opening scene highlights Rick's arrogance and Morty's growing frustration, perfectly encapsulating their dynamic as the series matures. At this point, the show has been going strong for several seasons, so it's no surprise they were so comfortable with trying out a new type of story with this episode. Except, of course, the audience doesn't realize how different this episode is going to be until we are several minutes deep into the episode. But at that point, we're already so invested into the story that we don't even realize how different this episode feels. One of the most striking elements of this episode is how it delves into the contentious relationship between Rick and Morty. Their argument over the usefulness of the vat of acid is awkward to watch, but the dialogue is undeniably clever, illustrating the growing tension between them. Morty's desire for independence and his willingness to challenge Rick's authority push the narrative forward while highlighting the significant character growth that Morty has undergone so far on the show. Rick's pettiness and need to prove his superiority, on the other hand, is pretty laughable and, to be honest, completely embarrassing. Rick is one of 2 Ricks to ever create interdimensional travel, and he has time and time again proven how intelligent he is, but as soon as Morty judges him for an idea, he completely crashes out and becomes super insecure. This shows something interesting about Rick, and this isn't a new idea for the show, but it's definitely reinforced in this episode, and that is that Rick is incredibly fragile. Despite being one of the most powerful beings in the universe, he still wants the approval of his grandson. But it's not because Morty is just displaying dismay, it's because Rick loves Morty. So the fact that Rick has this outlandish reaction regarding the vat shows that at this point in the show, Morty isn't just some replaceable side character anymore. He is someone Rick wants to stick around, and he wants Morty to admire him as well. Perhaps the most memorable segment of this episode is the montage depicting Morty's relationship with Carrie. Yes, that is her name. It's never officially said, but that's her name, it's confirmed. The montage is the peak of visual storytelling. Without any dialogue, the sequence somehow conveys a complete and emotionally compelling narrative arc. From the initial spark of romance to the tragic culmination of Jerry pushing the freaking place-saving device, ruining it all. Come on, dude. The lack of spoken words forces the audience to rely solely on visual cues, and the result is a deeply immersive experience that speaks volumes about the power of nonverbal communication. This montage not only stands out as one of the finest scenes in Rick and Morty, but also exemplifies how the show can transcend its comedic roots to deliver moments of genuine poignancy. The Vat of Acid episode boldly breaks away from the traditional structure of a Rick and Morty episode. Instead of following a standard A-plot and B-plot format, this narrative is tightly focused on a singular, escalating storyline. This departure from convention allows the writers to fully explore the dynamics between Rick and Morty without any distraction. The episode's unpredictable twists, from Morty actually convincing Rick to make the device, all the way to the gut punch reveal that every reset Morty initiated resulted in the death of another version of himself, kept viewers on the edge of their seats, and remember, that's my favorite place to be. The creative risks taken in this episode pay off spectacularly, showcasing the show's willingness to experiment with form and content. This episode's conclusion is nothing short of genius. After Morty's journey with the save point device and his eventual reconciliation with Rick, the story circles back to the Vat of Acid, where it all began. The final scene in which Morty, forced by Rick, dives into the vat is just absolutely hilarious, but it's also brutal because we know that Rick had that planned the entire time. So we have no choice but to sympathize with Morty for having to admit that he was wrong in the most embarrassing manner. This setting encapsulates the show's ability to balance humor and irony, leaving viewers both laughing and reflecting on the often toxic nature of Rick and Morty's relationship. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Vat of Acid episode is how it redefines the dynamics of Rick and Morty. The show, not just the characters. By focusing so intently on their conflict and the consequences of their actions, the episode departs from the show's usual rhythm to offer something entirely new. The episode's experimental approach ensures that it stands out not only within the series, but also within the broader landscape of animated television as a whole. The Vat of Acid episode is a shining example of what makes Rick and Morty one of the most innovative and compelling shows on TV. Everything about it combines to create an episode that is as thought-provoking as it is entertaining. By pushing the boundaries of what the show can achieve, this episode cements its place as the 4th best installment in the series' storied history. It serves as a reminder of the creative heights that Rick and Morty can reach when it dares to challenge its own conventions. Number 3. Unmortricken. Or, okay, is it Unmortricken or Unmortricken? I've heard people say Unmortricken because then you're emphasizing Mort and Rick, which is, like their names. But I think Unmortricken flows better. Okay, anyways, number 3, Unmortricken. That's what I'm going to say. And the long and storied history of Rick and Morty, Unmortricken Season 7 Episode 5 stands out as one of the most shocking and ambitious episodes the series has ever offered. Unmortricken earns its place as the third best episode due to its shocking cold open, dense intellectual dialogue, profound lore revelations, and its ability to provide unparalleled insights into the core characters of the series, particularly our Rick and Evil Morty. The episode's cold open immediately sets the stage for something extraordinary. Beginning with what seems like a routine sequence, it quickly spirals into a bewildering series of events that culminate in one of the most shocking reveals in the show's history. In just a few minutes, the writers unpack a large chunk of the history of Evil Morty, contextualizing his journey and decisions in ways that reshape our understanding of the series. This masterful setup signals to viewers that they are about to experience an episode that will redefine their perception of the Rick and Morty universe. The showrunners are acutely aware of the significance of this moment, because every frame of this episode just floors me, and they answered so many questions brought up over the course of the prior seasons. After Evil Morty's origin story, we see our Rick and Morty collapsing realities in order to speed up the process of finding Rick Prime. Evil Morty barges in due to his reality being combined with another one, and the three of them go on a quest to find Rick Prime, with Rick being as pissed off as ever, Morty being as clueless as ever, and Evil Morty being as angsty as ever. So far, we're already getting the classic Rick and Morty adventure, but this is also being skewed in a completely new way because one of the biggest villains of the show is just casually tagging along. Unmortricken, dang, I really don't know if it's Unmortricken or Unmortricken. Anyways, it's notable for not only revisiting Evil Morty, who, up until now has largely been an enigma of a character, but it actually explains Evil Morty quite a bit more now. The exploration of his post-Citadel existence elevates the episode, offering a thought-provoking commentary on freedom, identity, and the fruits of defiance, as well as the annoying revelation that the thorn that was always in your side will always somewhat be there, and for Evil Morty, that thorn has a crippling substance abuse problem, a blue shrubbery for a haircut, and an irrational fear of pirates. One of the most striking features of Unmortricken is its intellectual density. I don't want to sound pretentious, but hear me out. The absence of characters like Jerry, Beth, and Summer result in some incredibly dense dialogue that demands you pay more attention. You really have to lock in to watch this episode and get all of the things that they say. Without the comedic distractions that those other characters often provide, this episode delves deeply into existential and scientific themes, challenging viewers to engage with its ideas on a more cerebral level. Okay, I said I wasn't going to try to sound pretentious, but I definitely am, and sorry. This intellectual rigor is a hallmark of the best Rick and Morty episodes, and Unmortricken executes it flawlessly. Most of the dialogue is between the three smartest characters in the known universe of Rick and Morty, so there's jokes that I still don't understand after having watched this episode multiple times.
The worst turd is a pizza.
Cause Morty, I'm with you, man. How is the worst turd a pizza? I have no idea. If you have an idea, just let me know down below. The lore revelations in this episode are nothing short of groundbreaking. Among the most impactful is the explanation of Rick Prime, who's probably the most significant aspect of this episode, and I'm only just now bringing him up. He's a character who has haunted the series both directly and indirectly, and the revelation that he has been perpetuating the dead wife narrative with countless other Ricks is pretty crazy. Also, it's not countless other Ricks, it's literally every other Rick. This isn't the only big reveal in this episode, though. We also learned some other things. One, Rick was the first to lose his wife, which makes sense because she didn't die from the Omega device, and yes, I'm humble enough to admit that I'm an inferior. We also learned that our Rick and Rick Prime are the only two Ricks to actually invent portal travel, and that the voice of the car and garage is the same as the voice of Diane, which is technically something you could have figured out before this episode, because the voice actors for Diane and then the car and the garage have always been the same for the entirety of the show, but it's just something I never noticed. This all sheds new light on truly how much free time Rick Prime has had, and how similar he and Rick C-137 would be if their roles were reversed. The episode also excels at its use of parallels and callbacks. Rick Prime's dialogue, such as, "When I build something it works, it's called talent," has been said before by our own Rick, highlighting the unnerving similarities between the two of them. And I know they're technically the same person, but you don't expect the villain of the show and the main character to essentially just be the same thing. Furthermore, Rick named the schematics of the Omega device booger aids, and of course we know that Rick has a huge tendency of naming files booger aids, and I tell you, man, it'll come back to haunt you when you don't organize your files. You need to stay on top of that. Again, I know that they are just the same person from different dimensions, but it's still interesting to see these parallels between the two of them. Also, here's a fun little detail I noticed when writing this. When Rick is writing out the math for the modified portal gun that combines his and Evil Morty's, he says, "Carry the 2, hold the 3.
Carry the 2, hold the 3.
But then in the Rickshank Redemption, which is, the first episode to introduce Rick Prime, in the apparently false memory, the fake Rick says, "Carry the 3, add a 2 instead."
Carry the 3, Add a 2.
So maybe the minor difference of these two numbers is what differentiates a virus capable of destroying the galactic government or a successful portal formula. Beyond its intellectual and emotional depth, Unmortricken delivers some of the most thrilling action sequences in the series. What begins as a suspenseful treasure hunt quickly evolves into an awe-inspiring display of creative combat and narrative tension. The subsequent showdown between Rick C-137 and Rick Prime, culminating in Rick's ultimate revenge, is genuinely one of the best action sequences I have ever seen across all media. And I've seen a good bit of movies and shows, like I'm not like a total newbie making that claim. It's just genuinely that good. The climax in which Evil Morty defeats Rick Prime with the ultimate bait and switch is peak. Every single line that Rick Prime says as he's being punched to death is baffling. They all clarify so much for Rick's character.
I made you. Admit it. You would have been me. You lived in my house.
Really shows us how the two Ricks are the same. They just happen to experience a slightly different life, and then that dramatically changed both of them. Finally, Unmortricken succeeds in providing a beautifully nuanced perspective on Rick's life and his character. By juxtaposing the actions and philosophies of Rick C-137, Rick Prime, and Evil Morty, the episode forces viewers to confront the fragility? Is that how you say that? Anyways, the fragility of identity and the impact of choice. It is a testament to the show's ability to balance its trademark humor and absurdity with profound existential storytelling that we know and love. By offering unparalleled insights into the characters of Rick and Evil Morty, this episode not only redefines their arcs, but also enriches the overarching narrative of the series, making it a must-watch for fans and newcomers alike, which that kind of goes without saying. I don't know why I wrote that. I both want Rick Prime to come back, but also not. Typically, whenever a work of fiction kills off a character and then revives them, I have a pretty big problem with it. But the precedent that Rick and Morty has set up kind of supersedes that because Rick respawns all the time. I mean, did you watch the first episode of season 4? So it would make sense if the ultimate villain of the central finite curve came back and was not so easily silenced. Also, now that we're over halfway into the video, if you wouldn't mind subscribing, it would really make my day, and I greatly appreciate it. And also, let me know what you think of the video down below in the comments. Are my takes amazing or are they terrible? Or somewhere in the middle. Now let's get back into the video with the second greatest episode of Rick and Morty, and that is the Ricklantis Mixup. The Ricklantis Mixup is undoubtedly one of the most symbolic and narratively profound episodes of Rick and Morty. This episode begins deceptively simple, teasing a lighthearted, self-contained story about Rick and Morty's trip to Atlantis. However, it takes a bold narrative turn, focusing entirely on the Citadel of Ricks and sidelining the main characters. What unfolds is an intricate tapestry of interconnected stories that delve deeply into societal themes and complex dynamics of the Rick and Morty universe, or multiverse for that matter. I mean, universe literally means one verse. Now, unfortunately, we don't get to see Atlantis, but hey, at least the Citadel has its own kind of deep dive. I know you guys like these jokes. The episode tackles an impressive amount of content, weaving together 4 distinct storylines. First, we follow a gritty buddy cop drama involving a Rick cop and a Morty cop, which is an unusual thing in the Citadel, take note of that. Also, that entire story is based on the movie Training Day, so if you haven't seen that movie, I would definitely watch it. You'll notice a lot of similarities between that movie and the Ricklantis Mixup. Second, there is a coming-of-age story centered on a group of 4 Mortys navigating a corrupt and oppressive education system. Third, we witness the political thriller of Evil Morty's campaign for president, who, of course, we never even knew he was Evil Morty until the very end, and that part culminates in one of the most chilling moments in the entire series. And then finally, we explore the plight of a cookie factory worker Rick, whose rebellion against systematic exploitation serves as a poignant reflection on class struggles. Though these stories are all separate, they are intricately interwoven in both purpose and narrative, creating a unified commentary on oppression, discrimination, and systematic inequality. This episode is really deep. One of the episode's most striking achievements is its portrayal of the twisted depths of a megacity like the Citadel. It reveals the brutal aspects of capitalism and the dehumanizing effects of a technologically advanced yet morally bankrupt society. The discrimination between Ricks and Mortys is a central theme, highlighting injustices on both micro and macro levels. On a macro scale, some Ricks are wealthier than others for completely arbitrary reasons, which showcases systemic inequality because they are the same person. They don't deserve anything more than the other Rick does. And then on a micro level, even Ricks who are literal clones of each other, not even just different versions, literal clones, they face mistreatment due to external societal factors, such as having a deformed face. The episode also examines the exploitation of the working class. From the assembly line of the cookie factory to the materialist society's unrelenting demands, the Citadel's systemic abuse mirrors real-world struggles. This theme is reinforced through the symbolism woven into every aspect of this episode. It's a commentary on police oppression, exploitative governments, the suppression of solidarity, and the marginalization of minorities. Evil Morty's climactic speech during the presidential debate encapsulates these themes, delivering a scathing critique of the Citadel's social hierarchy. Beyond its social commentary, the episode significantly advances the overarching story of Rick and Morty by developing the character of Evil Morty. His calculated rise to power, culminating in his elimination of the Citadel's ruling council, establishes him as a formidable antagonist to Rick C-137. Evil Morty's cunning and ruthlessness suggests that his return will bring even darker and more sinister plans, making him one of the most compelling threats in the series. The decision to exclude the main Rick and Morty from this episode was a significant risk, but it paid off spectacularly. Their absence allows the audience to fully engage with the episode's themes and focus on the Citadel's societal intricacies without distraction. If our Rick and Morty had been present, the importance of this episode might have been diluted. With its ambitious storytelling and layered symbolism, it's no surprise that the Ricklantis Mixup is the highest rated episode of Rick and Morty on IMDb. However, in my view, it isn't quite the best. While it is an extraordinary piece of television, it doesn't feel entirely like a Rick and Morty episode. Its deviation from the show's usual tone and structure makes it stand out for sure, but it also places it slightly outside the essence of what makes Rick and Morty unique. Nonetheless, the Ricklantis Mixup is an undeniable masterpiece that showcases the show's capacity for profound storytelling and thought-provoking commentary. And, I mean, hey, who knew cookies could be this symbolic? Now for number 1, Rise of the Number. No, I'm just kidding. Imagine if the entire time you had been trusting my credibility, and then bam, I say that the best episode of the entire show is literally that garbage pile of an episode. Yeah, hilarious. But before I get into the number 1, let's talk about some honorable mentions. I mean, Pickle Rick isn't on this list. Total Rickall isn't. There are some amazing episodes of Rick and Morty that unfortunately didn't quite make the cut for my book of the greatest episodes of Rick and Morty. And that's because each of these 5 episodes that I've listed, and of course I will list the 5th one in just a moment, all do something specific for Rick and Morty as a show, and all provide something unique, and Pickle Rick just kind of overlaps with a lot of these other episodes. And it's the same thing with Total Recall. Those two were some of the hardest ones to say no to when making this top 5, but I just think that these 5 episodes all do something very different from one another and provide something incredibly meaningful to the history of the show. Let me know in the comments below what other episodes I should have included and where I messed up, because I'm genuinely curious to hear your thoughts. But now for number 1, the Rickshank Redemption Season 3 Episode 1. The Rickshank Redemption is not just a standout episode of Rick and Morty. It is the ultimate encapsulation of what makes the show exceptional. This episode is everything. You know, Rick at the top of his game, ingenious storytelling, biting satire, and unforgettable moments that have become incredibly iconic in the legacy of this series. From the very start, this episode plays with the audience's expectations. It begins at a Shoney's diner, leading viewers to believe that Rick has already escaped the Galactic Federation's clutches. But the narrative quickly pulls the rug out from under us, revealing that Rick is trapped in a simulated reality orchestrated by the Federation to extract his portal gun secrets. Just when you think you've caught up, the story takes another twist. Rick is in full control of the simulation, and his supposed tragic backstory, yeah, completely fabricated, doesn't exist. It's a masterclass in misdirection, proving that Rick isn't just smart. He's playing chess while the rest of us bug people are struggling with checkers. And these are obvious facts, but at this point in the show, you know, the beginning of season 3, these are things that really did need to be reinforced, and this episode does that spectacularly. Speaking of Rick, this episode cements him as the ultimate protagonist. He doesn't just escape from a high security prison, he takes down the Galactic Federation, deletes its economy, and manipulates the destruction of the Citadel of Ricks all in one fell swoop. Oh, and he also manages to grab some Szechuan sauce along the way. He also manages to teach us about it. I mean, I certainly didn't know it was a thing before this episode. And the Szechuan sauce bit was funny before that moment, and now we don't really talk about it, but hey, that's the kind of cultural impact this episode has. It made McDonald's re-release a sauce from 1998. Who else but Rick could create such chaos on screen and in real life? Beyond Rick's antics, this episode's structure is pure genius. It layers complex plot lines with rapid-fire humor and sharp commentary, epitomizing the Rick and Morty formula at its most efficient we've ever seen. We see Summer stepping up as a character, breaking into Rick's garage to retrieve his portal gun, and then rallying Morty to join her rebellion against the Federation. Or rallying's a stretch. They just kind of end up doing it. Summer had previously been more of a background character, and now she's proving to be more of a force to be reckoned with. Morty, on the other hand, shows significant growth with his relationship with Rick. He's no longer just the nervous sidekick. He's learning to stand on his own, even if he's still occasionally reduced to a stammering wreck. And then there's Jerry. Poor, pathetic Jerry. This episode marks a turning point for him, as Beth finally decides to divorce him. It's both satisfying and heartbreaking. Satisfying because Jerry's constant whining and insecurity finally got some deserving punishment. Heartbreaking because, well, Jerry's so pitiful it's kind of hard not to feel a twinge of sympathy. But let's be real, if anyone deserves to be kicked out of the house, it's the guy who crawled for several miles because he didn't want to lose his pants. On second thought, that might not be true. Jerry's a total loser, but Rick's not a great guy either. Anyways, the episode also expands the show's canon, offering tantalizing glimpses into Rick's backstory and his standing among other Ricks. The fabricated backstory of a happy family life tragically disrupted by an interdimensional bomb adds emotional weight, even as it's revealed to be a ploy. And while we don't get definitive answers about Rick's origins, the episode signals that the lore is deep and ripe for exploration, a promise that keeps fans hooked. What truly makes the Rickshank Redemption exceptional is how it encapsulates everything that Rick and Morty should be. It has biting commentary on government fragility, there it is with fragility, I don't know, I hope that's how you say it, and corporate greed, hilarious and clever dialogue, and over-the-top action sequences that never feel gratuitous. Rick's climactic rant about his motivations and his obsessive quest for Szechuan sauce is equal parts hilarious and unhinged, and it also reminds us of simpler times with the season 1 rant at the end of the pilot episode. And then at the end of the day, this episode is just endlessly rewatchable. Each viewing reveals new layers of humor, subtle details, and narrative brilliance. It's not just an episode of television, it's an experience. While the Ricklantis Mixup might be the highest rated Rick and Morty episode on IMDb for its deep social commentary and symbolic storytelling, the Rickshank Redemption takes the crown for just being peak Rick and Morty. It's also the second highest rated episode on IMDb, so it's basically first place in the eyes of the general population if you just round up. It's an episode that encapsulates the show's essence, delivering on every level while keeping us laughing, gasping, and pondering long after the credits roll. In the multiverse of Rick and Morty, this episode reigns supreme. So that was the 5 best episodes of Rick and Morty in my opinion. These episodes will give you the most collective understanding of the range of Rick and Morty, as well as exploring everything the show stands for. There are some absolute banger episodes out there that aren't on this list, like Pickle Rick and Total Recall, so if you think there was a snub, then let me know down below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe to see other videos that are just like this one, and I'll see you in the next one.